right, give me a second. No. Ah, that's great. All right. I don't know if I've ever seen that happen before. Let's try this again. Oh, it says it's live stream.
Hi,
Okay.
Kathy. Thanks for joining.
All right, we are all set. We are recording. Just for purpose of getting everybody caught back up, we called the meeting to order at 5:35 p.m. And we currently have a motion on the floor to approve the April minutes by Dana. And I will try to call the roll again. So Dr. Oladele,
Yes.
Ms. Lombardi,
Yes.
Ms. Schuster.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Any public comments? Nope, no public
Do
comment.
not get any requests.
Okay. So the fourth item on our agenda is review of the Q&A from the May Community Forum. So I thought two things, like one, we could, in addition to, we could talk about the Q&A, but also like the whole process, right? To just debrief a little bit. I know it's been a while since May, but things that we thought went well, things that we want to change for next time. So I'll say that one is the note taking. I think having someone other than the individuals who are like asking questions is ideal. So I think that's one. Other things that we think we changed or what we thought sort of went well, or just general reaction.
I mean, I have to still say getting the pre-asked questions just helps us, particularly if they're questions that end up involving a little bit of data research on our end. So that definitely helps. So I'm excited. I'm happy because I got Jenny's Q&A from the October 2023 Community Forum. So we'll start to build kind of this sort of location on the board website where we can post these Q&As, which Guard Hill actually recommended that they think is the best way to manage the community forums. But that being said, what I really remember about the first two community forums is we had a lot of people helping. At the time, the communications committee was smaller because it was only 3 people, but we would have like another 3 people from the board help as part of that. So I think, Carol, to your point, that it has to be, you can have the sort of, there's the preloaded question asker person, there's the live question asker person, and there really does need to be at minimum a third person or another member of the communications committee who's able to get those answers down as the questions start to come out and be answered. I think that's pretty helpful. And that's what I remember. And actually what I remember from the very first 2 that we did, then we had 2 people kind of like walking the floor. So that if anybody had a live question, they didn't want to use the app or anything like that. They just literally wanted to raise a hand and ask a question. They could call on them and kind of take care of that. So it required a decent number of people to run the community forum, which I think that's kind of the most important thing we'll have to do going forward, is make sure we have enough board members who can make it flow. I think that helped.
Yeah, I agree. Especially with like having someone sort of on the walking the floor, right? I think we had two people sort of paying attention to the live questions and also sort of identifying who's raising their hand to ask the question.
I will say we did not get any feedback.
None?
Zero. And I like checked the links again. And the first community forum we did, I think we got like 6 people give feedback. The second one we did, we had like 2 people give feedback. So I don't know. I mean, and it's not even like people, logged in and just didn't answer questions. They just didn't log in at all. So, we don't really have a lot of feedback to go on for changes, but yeah.
No, I think the ones you highlighted are certainly ones we have to make. I would say the other thing too that I think has always been maybe challenging with each forum is like splitting the like pre-submitted questions, like leaving enough time, like figuring out what that good balance is. The forum is an hour and a half long. And I think maybe for the like fall one last year, maybe we said an hour for so I guess this is where like the person who's like monitoring the live question comes in hand too, right? Because if we see that there are lots of questions popping up, maybe we give it that full half hour. I think that's what we decided before. So an hour for the pre-submitted questions and half an hour. However, if we have someone who's monitoring and they're like, there are 2 questions here, you can continue, right? You can continue with the pre-submitted questions. So I think that's I guess it just like reinforces having other hands on deck.
Yeah, I agree. And I do think that's the other thing is the pre-submitted questions will often get the sort of juices flowing, so to speak, so that as we give answers, it actually stimulates people to ask and submit other questions because one topic rolls to the other. I think if it was just strictly live, I mean, at least we can, you can sort of like get the conversation going, and live, I'm not even sure if it would actually work really well, but we'll test it out at some point, maybe. But yeah, I do think that helps.
I think that there was just too many questions and there was too much. I felt like there was too many questions. I think we should try to review them more and consolidate more than we did consolidate, because I think maybe we should try to meet and look at the questions and really consolidate them, because it just was a lot. And I kind of felt like there were some people there that just weren't for unleveling. And once they realized it was happening, they were just kind of checked out. And then they kept asking. I feel like there was just a lot of redundancy. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I feel like. So if we can maybe review the questions a little bit better before as a team, and then kind of narrow them down to more condensed questions, because I felt like there was a lot of questions and writing, and it was all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, there were, I think, a couple. I did condense some of them. There are probably a couple more that could have been condensed, but there were lots of redundancies. I think that at least I tried to get rid of to begin with. But I think it probably also felt like that, Dana, because we were trying to ask questions and write. So
it wasn't functional. It wasn't very functional.
No, so like for one of the forums, Jenny and I were asking questions, and sometimes in one of the panelists responding to a question, they answered another, right? And so because we weren't focused on writing an answer, we were like, oh, they answered that, right? So I think that's part of it too. So there's getting rid of redundancy prior to the forum, but then that's also part of the work of the people asking questions, is to like listen. So I think probably just having, again, like additional hands, because that's also, and I'll totally take a blame for that, because I didn't quite remember that, like, oh yeah, you do, that's also, you're also getting rid of redundancy in the moment, because in answering some questions, right, you tick off maybe like 2 other questions that are on there because it got answered just because they elaborated or something. So I think that I can totally understand like feeling that way too. Any other thoughts for, or like, as we sort of debrief the spring forum?
Carol, I know we discussed this in the past about recording the meetings. I think that would be really beneficial. It would alleviate the need to have someone take notes and to develop a transcript. And it would also allow those who can't make it for whatever reason to go back when they have an opportunity and not just read the words, but also, the nonverbal communication as well. That may be beneficial. Not sure where we are on that, but I believe that would be extremely helpful.
So I actually had a pretty lengthy conversation with Guard Hill about this, and kind of sought their professional advice, so to speak. They originally actually sort of landed that they thought the recordings would make sense, but they kind of came back to me the day later and was like, no, it's probably not going to elicit the very candid conversation that you're seeking for in this particular setting. Recordings fit well if you're giving a scripted message. Recordings are good for obviously board meetings because you have to have those, but when we put people somewhat on the spot and they're not as refined or polished as we are when we're sort of kind of pre-anticipating everything, it doesn't always work well. So their happy medium was actually the transcript. She said that is how some corporations will do sort of that kind of more impromptu Q&A is, because again, those, sort of, it allows the correct message to get out and for it to be accurate and not necessarily misinterpreted. And then we actually kind of had a sort of a sidebar conversation even more like about this, like even if we could just record the meetings simply to generate the transcript, but because it's the board's community forum, that becomes a public record. So then it becomes available. And then again, we run into that whole issue of sort of candid, frank, kind of ability to just speak, fairly off the cuff and maybe make a mistake and allow each other to correct each other. But so ultimately their recommendation was to do exactly what we've been doing all along. But, and
I kind of agree with you with the whole candidness and comfortableness and more informal. When it's recorded, everyone's just got a different feel about it. So I think if we did record it, it's going to generate a different vibe.
And I think that's true for the audience too, right? I think the idea is, again, that people, it's not like public comment. They can ask questions as it's sort of coming, into their head, and they also aren't being recorded. So again, that was their sort of take on it from their PR side of things.
So I can understand where you're coming from, because the idea is to, the idea is to, thank you. Okay. The idea is to create a small group environment. I just thought perhaps for those who couldn't attend, it would be easier. So yes, I can see that point. Definitely. Live streaming, if we live streamed, would we have to record it? Just to provide access.
We wouldn't. I don't believe so. Doesn't have
Well,
to
that,
be recorded.
right. And my only um, thought was to allow those who couldn't be there a chance to hear the responses. So yes, either a transcript or if we had the ability to live stream. And
I
of
mean,
course,
and
I do agree that we need to keep it, where people feel comfortable and they can talk. And sometimes people actually forget they're being recorded. So
and I think the recording too, because we've had teachers have not been incredibly enthusiastic about participating, at least not all of them. And I do think recording it would add another layer of their hesitancy. I guess the question becomes, what do you want the objective to be? Do you want people to be able to watch it at 6:30 p.m. on October 21st and see it live if they can't make it in person? Or do you want the information that comes from it to endure in posterity? So somebody who didn't participate in the SEL webinar in October of 2023, but maybe has questions, can now go back and find a space where all that information has been preserved. And I think Guard Hill's thought was, you guys are giving a ton of really good information that may become useful again. Put it in the preservation mode, because then you don't have to do another webinar on SEL for another 4 years, because you've already done one and that information is now in that transcript posted on the webpage.
Okay.
I think a good point too about like attendees too, their hesitance. I mean, some people may be more reluctant to ask questions if like they're going to be recorded or live streamed, things like that. So I do like the more intimate feel that they have. And I mean, in future, if we think that like recording and playing things back is something we want to do, we can consider like something that's more webinar style, right?
Yeah.
Where
I mean, I think Kat is going to try to come to the October Community Forum if she can. So I'm sure she'll have feedback for us once she goes through that as to ways we can make changes.
Okay, great. And then, so Jen, I am halfway through the answers. So aiming to get that to you by Friday this week. And then for you and other administrators to fill in, well, to check to see if they're accurate. And then there's some blanks that I'm like,
Can't remember. That's okay.
Yeah.
They're
like the deeper questions, right? They're the like, why did you make this? Those types of questions.
Yep. Okay, we'll deal with that. And yeah, and I kind of just I'll wait until we have both of them before I put them on the website. Then at least there's 2 of them living there, and then I can kind of create sort of. Liz will start working kind of on a community forum page where we'll be able to explain what they are, probably list what the October topic is going to be, at least the date for the May meeting or the May forum. So she'll start to create a landing page for that.
Okay, great. All right. Any other thoughts before we move on to discuss the fall forum? All right. So we have a date slated for the fall forum, which I believe is October 21.
Yep.
Yeah, October 21. 5:30 to, no, 6:30 to 8.
Yes.
That's what we usually, okay. October 21st, 6:30 to 8. So I thought we could brainstorm topics. So we talked about a couple of topics in the spring. I think in March, during our March meeting, we like were bouncing around a couple different ideas. I think also keep in mind that like our part of the goal of the forum, right, is to stay ahead of things, and for us not to be reactive, but to sort of anticipate what's ahead and how can we bring our community together to have a discussion and like hear their perspectives and just have conversation about it. So I'll pause there and open the floor for suggestions for fall topics.
I have a big one, and it's one that I really do want to start getting community's perspective on. And I think it would be, so the really big topic obviously is cell phones. And before the board starts trying to decide what to do with the state's guidance on what we should be doing with cell phones, I think it would behoove us to open up a community forum and actually get perspective on where our community is. Because I honestly have no idea whether there is widespread support for a ban or whether there will be widespread uproar. And I think just knowing that could be helpful. That being said, it's a pretty small topic in a much bigger world. In the spring, we had talked about artificial intelligence, and again, kind of sort of giving parents some perspective of what it looks like in schools. I know Mike went to our convocation, which our keynote speaker was about artificial intelligence. And he just looked at me at the end and he said, "Oh my God, I had no idea this is what your life is like." And so I was like, oh, okay. So, I mean, part of it is might be just a little semi-informative before we even dive into the questions that parents might have about how it's being used. And then, you know, I thought about things like even our one-to-one devices, you know, sort of how those are working. Because I mean, I know kids still bring personal devices because for whatever reason. So I just didn't know if a much broader theme of technology could kind of encompass a bunch of these sort of loose end things. And I would work with Kat at Guard Hill to kind of advertise it in sort of a way that, because technology sounds really boring, but to like kind of advertise it in a way that would be hopefully engaging for parents. And I'd really probably lean in a lot on the cell phone piece, but I think we could bring in a ton of other things that are happening that are having such a huge impact on how we're teaching and learning right now. And then, like I said, before the board does anything, you'd have a little bit better sense of where the broader community rests.
I mean, I think AI and cell phones are definitely like hot button topics, or they will be. So you know, I think those are good choices.
When is the state looking to make a law on the cell phones? Or
they didn't make a law. They issued very heavy guidance for what they expect school districts to do. So and I think it's partially because they haven't had time to get sort of the political groundswell to make it a law. So right now we don't really have to do anything with it. I think the sort of other challenge is these other districts are all jumping super fast into cell phone restrictions. So it's coming up in the news a lot, and it has to have people thinking. So I think at some point, you know, I know I'm trying to sell, I'll give a plug for my book, The Anxious Generation, but I'm trying to sell the BOAs to do a community book read around that, just to give some context for why this isn't a horrible idea, but there's things we have to consider when we do this. But I think it's, like I said, I think rather than doing it and getting community reaction, getting some sense of where community is before we have to make decisions, that's the perfect place for a community forum.
What is your feeling about what the teachers, do you think the teachers are all pretty much for no cell phones, or are they mixed?
I think for the most part at the middle schools, they would be, but there are definitely, like our digital media class, kids take way better videos with cell phones and the cameras they have on them. I mean, we give them cameras, but they just use their phones. So there's definitely, even at the middle school level, a place where they are used and used effectively. Pre-pandemic, my middle school was 100% like they were in the lockers locked up. They did not have them out. And our parents were really good about not contacting kids during the day and accepting life that way. Post-pandemic, we just have had a hard time pulling it back in at the middle school level. At the high school level, I think a lot of them would want it, but the fight to I mean, if you guys have ever like tried to get your kids to set their phone down at dinner? Okay, so imagine that times 24 or 5 times a day. It's just exhausting.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of teachers are struggling with it, and just yeah.
I do think there would be some. I think if it was not an all or nothing deal, it would be more positively received, I think. Because what I was watching today, I tried to log into the webinar and I had trouble logging in. I don't know if you saw. I think it was because I was at work and they were blocking me, but nonetheless.
I couldn't log in either, Dana.
Oh, well, anyway, this morning I caught the early segment on it, and it looks like some schools are doing the door thing, which Carlo's math teacher last year said he would use it if he needed to, but if he didn't need to use it, he wouldn't. And it was the door thing with all the pockets.
Yeah.
And I feel like if there's a medium to it, if the kids know they can bring their phones to school, but they're going to have to put them in the door pocket while they're in class, then when they leave class, they can get it. I feel like that will get a better response from the kids and the parents, just because there are some parents that need to know where their kids are every second of the day. And I feel like if it's an all or nothing deal, you're going to get the fight. Like people are just going to fight it. But I do feel like it's a benefit to the teachers for the kids to have it not on their body and not in their reach for that period. And then when they go in the hall and they go to lunch, okay, whatever.
I imagine that it's hard because there's no like sort of system-wide policy or procedure around like a protocol for cell phone use, right? So it has to be hard for teachers who make that decision, right? Like that's not happening, that's all around them. So I do think, I suspect that, most teachers would be in support of something. And, I read some of the examples of policies, right, from different districts, and they vary. Some are like, nope, and others are like, put it in the slot, the pouch when you walk in. So, it just depends. Yeah, anyway, I think it would be.
I have to say, I did like what Carlo's math teacher did last year by giving that, not like it's a threat, but like, look, it's there. If you guys get out of control with your phones, then we're going to start using it. And I don't think he used it the whole year. So that kind of made me feel like it might have put the kids a little bit more in a responsible manner of, okay, if I use my phone and I get in trouble, he's going to just make me leave it there. So let me just stay off of it. So I think that's why I feel like there's got to be like a good happy medium somewhere.
So Jen, do the teachers think it's a bit, not the policy, do the teachers think the cell phones in the school are a big deal right now?
I think they are a distraction for sure. And I mean, I know that when we do our learning walks, I see kids on their phones. And I mean, and again, it's not even, I mean, a kid can have their phone put away, but if they have an Apple Watch and they have a notification turned on it, they're getting an average of one notification every 1 to 5 minutes. So if your watch is buzzing you constantly, even if your phone is in a pouch on the door, you're not focusing or paying attention. I mean, and I guess that's a lot of the point that the policies and the sort of broader understanding is trying to make. If it was just phones, we could throw pouches onto the door and everybody could put them away, but it's the technology that they're wearing. It's, I mean, I know I've got kids who have, I mean, they have long hair like me, they throw in.
Even if they use the pouch, right? Even if they use the pouch.
All that's still going on.
Yeah, these kids, they're lighting up their wrists.
Yeah. Yep. So that's why districts are doing the Yonder pouches. And again, great idea. You know what a kid's going to do? They're going to bring a burner phone, drop it in the Yonder pouch, and keep their phone on them for the rest of the day. because that's what they're telling us they're doing. So, I mean, the solution isn't easy. And that's why I think hearing perspective helps, because there will be a lot of decisions to be made, and none of them is a simple fix.
So I see that the main issue with parents will probably be safety and being able to contact their child for whatever reason, for various reasons. And so I see this as a challenge, because I don't think we can get away from cell phones.
Yeah, so one
all
of the really interesting suggestions that has come up is actually including, like, a member of our police department, or people who are kind of involved in sort of like crisis management, like when a real situation happens at a school, onto sort of as part of the discussion, because frankly, and they said, this isn't for the schools to say, it's really for first responders to say to parents, you contacting your kids during a crisis is actually putting your child in more harm than just letting the school do what they have to do, because we, law enforcement, is actually in charge. And that has been one of the sort of suggestions coming out, to kind of start reinforcing that message that no, you really don't have to be in contact with your kids all the time for safety. And in some cases, doing so makes it worse. And then, we talk about, like, I mean, the day to day, like, hey, I need to pick you up at 12:45 or whatever. You broke your bracket and I just got an appointment with the orthodontist. I mean, pre-cell phone, I know when I was in school, or you just call the school, and so, but then that means it changes for us, because frankly, schools have gotten away from a lot of that because parents just make arrangements like that directly with their kids. But it would mean, kind of changing and retraining things to some extent, because at the elementary school, and I guess that's the other thing we have to sort of remember is, and they are no cell phone policy completely. Like, don't even bring them to school. So, well, in theory, that's what they are.
They have them.
Oh,
They
yeah.
have them in school. They have
Again,
Apple
in theory,
Watches.
that's,
They have
yes,
phones.
but
Now
that's what they
but they
want.
also have, right, but they also have a very different dynamic. They're not switching classrooms
Yeah.
for the majority, unless you are in sixth grade. So parents do know where they are. But the other thing is that it's very difficult, and if we're talking specifically about an elementary school, which doesn't really apply, because they have a teacher. You can't always get a hold of them, but you can, they're very responsive as far as knowing where the kids are at all times. However, when you have a middle school and a high school situation, you don't. I'm not saying what's right and what's wrong. What I'm saying is that I believe that this is what parents will want. And times have evolved, and this is probably a lot of the pushback. And you might also hear that since they're just guidelines and it's not legislation, and do I see the issues and the distraction with social media? Most definitely. And the distractions in the classroom, yes. Do I believe it's a distraction? Yes. And I can see the challenges as a teacher. And I just think that if we're going to bring this up as technology and a community forum, that this is most likely the concerns that you will hear. And if they'll say, well, if you have pouches, you can't make decisions necessarily based on what some kids will do. Maybe you will have kids who get burners and avoid the rules, but there you have a lot of kids who follow the rules and do exactly what they are told, because this is the rule and they don't want to lose their privilege. This is a privilege, not a right. And it's the same thing. The message has to come home. It has to be a consistent message, cohesive message from the district, and parents say, sure, you can have it because something may happen. And to alleviate the stress with a very different environment than what we grew up in. Not necessarily do they think their kids are at risk. And if there's an emergency situation, yes, they should go through the school, and just being very consistent messaging as to how to contact, who to contact, what to do. But sometimes fear does take over, and we can't ignore that. But in a community forum, this is most likely the concerns that we will hear. Statutory, not statutory, they're guidelines, and just we can't make rules because of what a small percentage of students may or may not do who don't follow the school rules. And then you just adjust as well. You say, okay, this isn't working, and here's why it's not working.
I mean, it sounds like, from what I'm hearing, that technology, or however we want to call it, may be a good fall forum topic. Is that
we're engaging in a pretty lengthy conversation about it, just somewhat naturally.
Yeah.
Here.
So I mean, are we, like, as a committee, do we think that, cell phones, AI would be, like, together, maybe good to sort of pair together for a fall forum focused on technology?
Yeah. Do you also, I mean, I just want to throw another one out there, and Jen, maybe this is another topic, as budget. So I don't know if that's something you maybe want to touch on in
we tried to keep it really separate from the community forum for a couple of reasons. The first is we have so many opportunities for people to talk to us about the budget. From November, now the 2 joint AFC BOE meetings, all the meetings that we have, my going out to the town meetings. So there's so many. So that's why we've sort of kept it out of the community forum, because it has a platform in a whole bunch of other places. The other part is in the spring, by the time the community forum comes around, we've already had the referendum. So it doesn't necessarily lend itself to feedback on the budget. It would be more of an October kind of topic. But again, we sort of have kept it out of the community forum because it has a platform in so many other places. Even like the Q&A that we post up, that's pretty much like, you guys get a question from anybody, we're going to answer it on that Q&A, and we have been. And so that being said, at some point, we may want to give consideration to switching the community forum to just a straight open forum, and people can just come and ask whatever questions they want. At that point, you might start to get questions about the budget. But but until then, I think we've kept it separate because it just dominates so much else of what we do, and then we never get a chance to talk about other things.
Right. No, I was just thinking about the construct of the community forum, where there is the ability to go back and forth, where you don't necessarily have that ability in the other venues. So I'm fine with it. I just thought I would just bring it up and throw it out there. But I think not everybody understands how the budgets are done. So I'm not sure if this could just be like a shorter type of interim thing. I do agree that it's more of an October subject. I also agree that, considering all of the press that the cell phone guidelines have been getting, that maybe the October community forum is technology related and AI too, encompassing. And then the other thing, and I'm just throwing this out there, and maybe we won't get any responses, if we can identify, 3 topics and do a survey, just leave an other, and then maybe it would also give us some ideas for additional forum topics. What are your thoughts?
So, I mean, I think that's part of the feedback that we seek at the end of the forum, right? Like, do we have ideas for future forum topics? And maybe we can rethink when and how we try to solicit that information from people, because sometimes that matters too. So, we can think about whether at the fall forum we can have like pen and paper in a box, like really old school, right, with a little sign. I mean, people might, when they're walking in or out, jot something down, stick it in the box, and we can think about that. you know, I like
button on the
beginning or
website, maybe even. I'm not sure if that's possible,
Oh.
but putting something on the website when you have a community forum, if you have a community forum under communications or however it's being set up
next
on the
to
website,
the like transcript,
right?
like suggestions for future forums.
Right. So, you know, I know I was off camera when the discussion was it wasn't feedback. So two things come to mind, and I can be completely off base, but there was some type of glitch. Doesn't seem possible considering we were able to get questions during. The other is that it seemed it seemed a little contentious, that people weren't happy. They thought it was already a foregone conclusion with the last topic, that maybe that's why we didn't get feedback. Just a possibility.
I don't know, but usually you only get feedback from unhappy people, or you always get more feedback from unhappy people than you do
Well,
from
you do.
happy people. So yeah, to your point, I would have expected more, but
Unless they're exasperated and they're like,
right.
you know,
I almost said something.
throw in the towel.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Forget this. Right. Forget
Yeah.
this.
I mean,
I'm not,
yeah.
If people don't feel heard, sometimes you get just the opposite. You can get people who are just silent and just are very upset, or who have just thought that perhaps their voice doesn't matter, or you get people who are outraged, and then it's usually a 10-to-1 type of positive and negative feedback. But I mean, maybe there was just a glitch.
Yeah.
But I also think it's valuable to get feedback from the community as to what they would like to be able to have an open forum and have a discussion with the superintendent and the administrators, teachers, and also the board.
I agree. So we have about 12 minutes left, and so there's two things that I'd like to get to. One is the schedule, like when we'll meet this year, and the other is, and I don't think it's too early to start this, but a list of like roles for the fall forum. So, you know, I have 5 here, right? Prepping questions, right? So reading the pre-submitted questions, sorting them, reading the questions at the forum, watching for the live questions. And then I think someone else like managing questions, raised hands, things like that. And then a recorder. So, I mean, that's more, I listed more like roles than we have committee members. So, you know, I'm happy to sort of reach out to the board widely to get folks, see who'd be interested. I do think the three that should be, well, 2 that should be us for sure is like sorting the questions and probably like reading, like sorting and reading. I think should be our committee. But that's not to say like if somebody else is like, sure, they're board members. But anyway, are there other like roles that I may be forgetting? And also, is anyone like interested in doing one of those for the fall? And are we in agreement that it'll be something the fall forum will focus on technology? I guess that's number 1. So Donna brought up budget, and it sounds like that might not be the right forum for that. I don't remember hearing any other topic. But
well, and I guess my other question too would, well, I have parents of kids who are in the school. Are there other technology issues that come to your mind as parents that you sometimes don't quite understand what's going on, that you would want more information? I'm thinking more of marketing it and then obviously how those questions get generated. Schoology
and Power School and
Okay.
together, how they do and don't work together. And I'll tell you, this is just personal experience, but the process of signing up for parent-teacher meeting and generating. I know this might be something small, but like I go from like meeting to meeting, from place to place, right? And I'm like, okay, what's next? I couldn't figure out during my first one, like, what's the list? What did I sign up for? Where's their list? If PowerSchool could generate, so, you go in and you like, if it could spit out like, here, Carol, here's your list. Here's the time you're meeting Jen, and then you're meeting with Donna, right? And here's Jen's room number. That would be really amazing and reduce a lot of stress. And I'm sure I'm not the only one, but I was literally like walking around like, I'm not really sure where I'm headed or the order, because you don't remember the
Right,
order of
right.
like,
I had to go back in because we had the same thing. My husband's like, "Where are we going?" And I'm like, "Well, all right." So I had to go back in and see what I signed up for,
yeah,
and because you do it, and it's you
you
don't
do it ahead
remember,
of time,
you
and
don't
then,
write
yeah,
it down.
yeah.
And well, another thing, to piggyback onto that is that although we thought parents knew this, and maybe it was parents who were coming in and from the elementary school into the middle school. And I don't know if this might just be a very simple topic. It was that they can waive their kids in and out of classes. And I said, well, did they cover this during the parent night for the sixth graders? And they said, no, they had no idea. And maybe this is a whole different community forum. Maybe this is a good forum for the spring, right? To reach out to the elementary. And this was in this case, it was a parent. It was their first child coming into the Amity district, and they didn't know. And I had to show her where it was in PowerSchool and the form, and then it just automatically regenerated a different schedule for their child. But they had no idea that you could do this. And she said this wasn't discussed. And so maybe it's a curriculum type of conversation, because it does sort of piggyback onto curriculum and waving kids into classes.
Or it just sounds a little bit like just good feedback on what we share with parents as part of sixth grade night. I don't know that it's a
Right.
conversation for a tech community forum, but I get the Schoology Power School, and I think that's a great place, a great one to add. And I didn't know
The only reason I was saying that was because they had to do it in forms,
right.
in PowerSchool. It wasn't that they even knew that they didn't even know this was a possibility for them to do. And it was buried in, it was buried in forms. Yeah. They had no idea where to go. Okay. And maybe it could live under my schedule. Maybe it could just be an email that, I think that the assumption is that parents know that they can waive kids up and down. And I did also tell them, I said, how teams are set, and how many, a lot of kids in the middle school coming in as seventh graders this year, and that not to worry about moving kids around, because kids move around the first couple of weeks. So you're not set in stone. And that was something that they didn't know either. And that's, part of just the first time having your oldest child coming into the district. So that was the only reason I thought it was part of the technology, because of where it lived, and it wasn't intuitive that it wasn't forms.
And maybe somebody will ask a question about that.
The functionality, like how do I take advantage of it? Like, what are the must knows about? Like,
Dana, did you have any other ideas as a parent? Because I saw you go off mic or off mute for a while ago.
Yeah. So, the only thing is, I constantly get people. I just had somebody the other day that's like, oh, I guess the DEI person that they hired is managing those menstrual products. And I'm like, what? So I know it's probably something you don't want to do, but I think if there was some communication more about what the DEI coach really does on a day-to-day, and is more of an interference and more of a like, oh crap, this came up, how do we deal with it? I think it would just back people down. Like, that was like, when that person came to me and said that, I was like, what did you just say? Like, oh, I guess they're coordinating the tampons. And I'm like, oh. So I
So
feel like,
I,
although it's a redundant issue and it's probably something you don't want to deal with, there's still like ignorance out there that they need to be educated. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I just mean like, that's when I was just like, wow.
yeah. So I did talk to Kat about that again and asked her about her thoughts on that as a community forum. She came back and she watched some of our board meetings and she's like, a community forum isn't going to change this because they're just going to, I mean, she's like, how many times have you said there's no DEI curriculum? And then they just come back and talk about the DEI curriculum again. And you're like, there isn't one. And like, she's like, it's not productive. So she and had really, again, much like we're going to post the Q&As from the community forum, she said, just start getting FAQs of all these things that they say about DEI and make just write it down and point people there. And, and some of them will be very basic, like, what does the DEI coach do? And he's not even called that anymore because now we've got school climate under him and he's really the school climate coordinator at this point. But I wanted to go there, but like, what does he do? Why do we do the surveys? So as questions, and I'm, and that'll be an appeal to the board. If you get questions about it, send them to me, and he and Peter and I are going to start building that platform, and it'll live, as part of our school climate inclusion and belonging website. So that way we can direct people there.
Yeah. Which is to be developed, right? That doesn't currently.
So we do have that so we have that website, and the name has all changed again because we've really shifted a lot of it towards the school climate since that is all coming down the pike. But the Q&A we haven't started yet. I have some general questions that I know we just keep getting all the time that Peter and I will start answering. But I think back to, like when we do the budget, right? And people have questions and they send them, and me and Terry meet once a week and we fill in the answers. It's pretty effective because people have the same questions over and over. And we can just have this document that says, go here. If you have questions, chances are it's already been answered. And so, and Kat said in that case, it just is easier because they just keep asking the same questions over and over and over again. So I will be working on that one just in a slightly different format. And then once it's out there, I'll work with her actually to figure out the best way to kind of publish it.
Yeah, and let people know, make them aware that it exists. So we have about a minute left. So I think a couple things, and correct me if I'm wrong. One, it sounds like we are okay moving forward with fall forum focus on technology. You got a couple different ideas, and I'm sure if you have other ideas, send them to Jen. Two, we have a date, right? October 21st, 6 to 8:30. 6:30 to 8. 6:30 to 8. I will email the board with, well, first, let me know if like you're interested in like doing any of the roles that I mentioned. And then I'll send a message to the wider board, see who would like to participate. The last thing is like meeting in this last minute. So Jen and I talked briefly about this timing after like, having, now that we're going to have 2 board meetings. And so we usually meet the Tuesday after the meeting. So I guess we want to meet the Tuesday after the like more operations meeting or the special meeting. It'll still be virtual, I guess, still the same time, but like, I guess if we did it after the special meeting, it might, timing wise, it might be closer to when we meet like now.
So yeah, if we do it after the regular meeting, it'll be just like what we're doing right now. And the benefit of doing it like at this point in the month is if, Paul and I, we assemble kind of his board newsletter. And it has to go out like around this between like usually the 17th and the 20th to get to all the papers on time. So so what we used to do at this meeting is I would have kind of the topics that he and I were going to work on into the board newsletter. It just didn't work this last time because we just had too many meetings to cram into August. But it basically would give the communications committee some feedback as to what we get into that newsletter that then goes out to the broader community. If we met after the special meeting at the end of the month, we can still do that, but it wouldn't go out for like another 3 weeks. So it would be pretty old news by the time it went out. Whereas if we meet after the regular meeting, it's fresh news. And it doesn't mean that the stuff we talk about at the special meetings can't get included in, because again, sort of to Mike's point at the board meeting, those are much more informational and they aren't actions that the board necessarily is taking action on. It's just a matter of timing, really, in terms of when
I have to jump off. I have to pick up somebody. So the timing doesn't affect me either way. So whatever you decide on is great. So I think other than that, I'm good. But I will definitely I gotta jump off. So thank you and
Thank
talk
you,
to you
Dana.
guys soon. Okay.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Dana.
thanks, Dana. Any
So
preference?
Jen, I just wanted to, so now we're going to have two meetings. Once again, I wasn't able to watch the meeting that I was unable to attend, and they're going to be special meetings. And I had a thought that perhaps, maybe doesn't fall under the purview of communications, but doing a brief summary of what happened at our board meetings. Now, Paul's newsletters don't necessarily touch on every single vote, but maybe something that summarizes the votes, the outcomes, also, unless you were at the meeting because you weren't able to watch the meeting because whatever reason it kept locking up. When I tried to watch the meeting several times, how are we going to communicate that the board is now moving to 2 meetings a month, and what the format will be, so people who want to come, and since you just called it a special meeting, I'm guessing it's not going to have public comment.
I think that's still to be decided.
Okay.
And so that was some of the conversation. But what you're describing in terms of the votes and everything like that, those are the meeting minutes. And we'll notice people again the way that we're supposed to for meetings by posting them and sending it out. I do think that after, like, I think his September communication, we will make that a feature article. But again, I think it's the purpose of what those newsletters are, and those newsletters are sort of Kat's thought on how we PR to a greater community, and meeting minutes is frankly not how we PR to a greater community. But
no, not necessarily meeting minutes, but things that do matter, things that are not removing money around.
Right. So, so we usually try to capture like the policies that we've approved, right? Because that's a big one. Special presentations that were given, which that will be the special meeting in a lot of cases, because that usually contains a lot of information, significant decisions the board made. A lot of times that's around budget. Those are the things that we've tried to capture in his newsletters. And then, a couple of the feel-good stories that I know haven't quite made it out. We know about all the kids who get national merits, but that should go into the paper. So those are some of the things we try to get at. But yeah, I definitely know the policy, the special presentations, and anything related to the budget have been sort of a standing item. When we don't have policy at the meeting, then it's a little empty as a newsletter.
Right. So more of what I'm thinking about is like the 1-minute wrap up. What happened? So sometimes some districts do that. And the superintendent actually presents, like, they'll just do a video. It'll be on the website. It's a 1-minute thing. It doesn't need to cover everything. And people don't necessarily want to go through the meeting minutes to try to figure out what are the big things. Like I said, a 1-minute wrap up. We had one time talked about like a board's corner, and I see that you've used that for the superintendent and the principals. So I'm not sure if this is something we want to think about for next time, if it is something that the board is interested in, if we believe it's a way we want to go, as this is going to now be a standing committee.
So I think I love these ideas. I'm gonna ask us to table them for next time.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, those are all really interesting ways to keep people abreast of what's happening. So we can add that to continue the conversation during our next committee meeting. We're 7 minutes over. I have to also hop off. So I will follow up, as I said, sending an email to the larger board about the forum, the date, and then soliciting sort of help for the next forum. But yeah, I'd like to adjourn the meeting now at 6:37.
Without objection.
Yeah.
All right, I am going to end the recording.
Thank you.
Maybe.
Thank you.
Thanks.